Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pre-Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben, and today we are making a professional chiropractor connection out in Canada, Vancouver, British Columbia with Alain. Can you just introduce yourself and maybe reflect back on that moment when you decided you wanted to become a chiropractor? Where were you at in life and what pulled you in this direction?
Yeah, man. So I've been in practice here in Vancouver. Well, I guess in practice in general, 22 years now. And I come from a huge family of chiropractors. So I don't know what number I was, but we have about 44, I believe, chiropractors in my family. So it's been something that's been going on for a while. And actually, but interestingly, the first chiropractor in my family was my mom's older brother. So it's actually been only two generations. And I remember growing up, we would always be like brought along to different chiropractic seminars and these philosophy seminars and these personal development seminars that my parents were really into. And all of my parents' best friends were chiropractors and their families. And so we had this big network of people that we just, grew up with. And I always remember when I was probably 13 or 14, sitting down around the kitchen table. And it was right around the time when my first cousin, who was older than me, was starting to go, he decided to go into chiropractic. And so there was that kind of net of chiropractors just started getting bigger and bigger. And my parents sat us down at dinner time. Not that they sat us down, but we were sitting down at dinner. And my mom says, she's like, listen, guys, she's like, I know that this chiropractic thing that we do, it's like, it's a big part of our life and it's a lot of what we do. And we're really excited about it. We're super passionate about it, about reaching out and helping people and really changing the world. But we don't ever want you to feel like you need to do this. Like, this is not, there's no pressure from us. Just because you guys are involved and you guys want to be involved, that's totally fine. But don't ever feel any pressure from us to become chiropractors. She said, with that said, so whatever you choose to do with your life, make sure that it's bigger than you. And it's something that I always remember. That was a pivotal moment in my life that, and I didn't know that I wanted to become a chiropractor at that point. It wasn't until a few years later when I was at a chiropractic seminar called Dynamic Essentials, or DE, we call it. And one of my favorite speakers from actually years ago, when I was 13, my mom said, you don't have to come to the seminar, you don't have to come to the speakers, but just come see this one speaker. I just want you to come see this one speaker. It was on Friday night. And every seminar, he spoke on Friday night. His name was Dr. Ian Grasham. He's passed away some years ago. But I remember sitting there as a 13-year-old and not really caring about what was going on. I love the energy that we were in. I love just being around all these people that were on, had this common vision, had this common mission to help to transform people's lives. And I just remember listening to Dr. Grasham, and it was like, he just had me hooked. I totally understood why he was my mom's favorite speaker. And every time I got a chance to speak, to go see him speak, I did. And it wasn't until years later seeing people like Tony Robbins speak and people like Mark Victor Hansen, in the personal development world, and their love for chiropractic and their love for the stuff that we did and how we really helped to really shift humanity forward, was that, I was kind of at that moment. It's kind of, I was probably 16, 17, 18. I don't remember the exact moment, but I'm like, yeah, this is something I want to do. I want to get, I want to be a chiropractor. I want to get this message out. And so I never really had the vision to be in practice. I never saw myself in a practice, but I always I just want to serve chiropractic. I want to serve this message and serve this vision. So I went to chiropractic college shortly after, did some traveling after high school, and graduated actually with my younger brother. We graduated together and at Life University. And haven't looked back since. 22 years ago.
Can you maybe just reflect a little bit on that experience at Life University and talk also about the culture that Dynamic Essentials embodies and how it has influenced the culture at Life University, and maybe just give some context to what it's like to be a person who's planning to become a chiropractor and move humanity forward and shift lives in a way that we do?
Yeah, so I loved my time at Life University. I mean, my sister now, she's also a chiropractor. She's married to a chiropractor. They were both grads of Life University too, and they live down in the Atlanta area. And I know it's changed a ton. It's expanded tons over the years. It's like night and day from even when I was there. And when I was there, it was already by a long shot the biggest chiropractic college in the world. But I know one of the things that even though it was the biggest college, and I can't speak to the experiences that all the other colleges, but having been around and having spoken at various campuses, one of the things that really stuck out to me about life and about the vision that life had, and it was very similar to at Life West in the Bay Area where you are, is the underpinning of everything was this one kind of the axiom was this thing we call the lasting purpose. And the lasting purpose was something that was embodied into in everything that they taught, everything that we experienced at life. That comes the underpinning of that. And that was really to love, give, and serve out of your own abundance. That was kind of it. And so everything that we learned, everything that, the culture of all of that was, how can we love humanity? How can we serve humanity? How can we, do all of these things for people for the betterment of life? And that was really kind of the culture that underpinned everything. And I mean, partly because when we're, regardless of what school people choose to go to, there's always going to be people that are outliers of that. Like whether that was the culture at Life or not, that's the culture that I chose to be in. And so I chose to be with people who did the same things. And, it was really kind of an identity that we chose. Because I know a lot of people who, some of my best friends went to other schools that almost had the exact opposite philosophy. Yet they found their tribe within that. They found their people that they just meshed with, and that they allowed them to kind of be on that same mission as well. Joe,
I'm curious if you could kind of just share how advantageous it was for you to have grown up in a chiropractic family, seeing like the world through this lens of chiropractic, maybe unknowingly, maybe you had an awareness about it. As you were going into chiropractic school, how consistent was that amongst your peers? How many people did you feel were there for like congruent reasons to truly become a chiropractor? And how much of it was people whose fallback option was chiropractic because they didn't get into medical school or physical therapy school, and they might have chosen going to chiropractic because it was easier to get into, or maybe they heard you could make a lot of money. I'm just curious, like from your vantage point, how prevalent that was as you were going through school, and maybe just your awareness of it now, having been in the game for 22 years, seeing many chiropractors, you could say, lose interest or lose touch and drop out of practice really prematurely, I would say, within the first couple years of practice. And how can we maybe prevent that? Or what are some things that I think maybe you could give as advice to students that are really about to enter chiropractic school and need to really look at themselves in the mirror and check in with themselves on a deep level, make sure they're doing it for the right reasons, or that they're just really aligned in their path?
Mm-hmm. Well, so here, I'll tell you a little story that's kind of a tangent to that, but it'll kind of get to your point. I remember I was probably 5 or 6 years into practice, and I'd hired a coach. And this guy's name is Ed Quirk. He was my coach at the time. And I remember we were looking at setting goals for the year, and setting goals for my practice, setting goals for, all different areas of my life. And I remember talking to him, and I was thinking like, Ed, like I have these big goals for my practice. There was money goals, there was volume, people goals, all kinds of different goals. I said, I don't want to feel like as I'm setting these goals, like I'm just coming from a place of ego. Like I just want to make $1 million just because it'll make me feel good or whatever. Because I didn't want to get caught in that trap of just doing things for the shiny objects or all that stuff. And I always remember what Ed told me. He just kind of paused after I spoke. This is back when we did stuff on the phones. We didn't have things like virtual meetings like this. And he said, "Don't worry about your goals." He's like, "If you have any shot of reaching these goals, you will need to become a different person." He says, "So let your goals, let this like the volume goals I had, let the money goals, let it change you." And I always remember that. Like that was such a pivotal thing. It was like, yeah, like for whatever reason, someone gets into chiropractic, I think is totally fine. Like whether I know tons of people that went into it because they just want to make a crap ton of money. I know a ton of people who went into it in my own class who came because they just didn't think that they had any other options. But then from that standpoint, regardless of what it is, the experience, if you just put yourself into that moment, put yourself into the experience and put yourself into things like whatever it is that I need to get out of this, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go to every club. I'm going to go to every seminar. I'm going to go to, I just want to be the best. If I want to you want to make the most money, well, you got to be the best of the best. So how do you become the best of the best? You learn from the best. And by learning from the best, that you can't help but take on some of those principles, some of that identity. So I think whatever it is that people, wherever it is that you are at, just the number one thing I would have you consider is that just to give yourself to the process 100% and allow the process to change you. Because whether you think chiropractic is just this little thing or whether you think it's the biggest thing, it doesn't matter. That your part in it is going to allow people to transform their life. And by doing so, you're going to allow yourself to transform your life. You can build a life and create this lifestyle for yourself and your family that is unimaginable. Yet, by doing so, to get to that point, you have to be. Another one of my coaches years later, he said, who do I have to become in order to have the things that I want to have? And it's all about the becoming. And I think that's one of the amazing things about chiropractic in as a profession, is that it's all about that. It's helping people to become different people. It's not just giving a bunch of low-level skills and tactics and strategies on how to improve their life, but it's really at a foundational level that we work with the subtle substance of the soul, the master control system of the body, that when we can affect the nerve system, we can affect neurogenesis and neuroplasticity through the chiropractic adjustment and through our communication of these principles to people and how they can help to change their lives. I mean, it changes us. So regardless of where people are at, just give yourself 100%.
Can you share some insights of what your strengths were and how you developed yourself to being a new person and growing internally and really expanding your consciousness? Like, give us some insights into your personal process, just so that we can understand. I kind of have an idea that people tend to be like more scientists or thinkers, big thinkers, or they're more artists, or they're teachers, or they're entrepreneurs. But I'm just curious from your vantage point, like, what were your strengths? What did you really focus most of your energy on in school, and how did that shift as you got out of school? Maybe expand to other areas that you wanted to invest time and energy in yourself.
Sure. So when I got out of school, I remember very clearly, like I knew that I wanted to open my own practice. I knew that I had interviewed with a few different offices, and I was like, I can't see myself doing it. So I opened my own office in a little town called Canmore, Alberta, right near Banff, in the mountains in Canada. And I remember the one thing I had going for me, or the thing that I thought at the time was the thing, like, if I've got this alone, I've got it set, was that I knew that I had this belief in the principle of chiropractic that everybody needed to know. And I was super passionate about doing so. And so I built out this beautiful office, and, I was just super proud of the space that we had. I was like super excited about the culture we wanted to build. And I thought that just because, I'm just super excited about things, that I'm going to open my doors and people are just going to flock in, and this energy that I'm putting out is just going to, everything's just going to blow up. And within months, I realized that was not the case. I was struggling. And I couldn't figure out, how can I be so excited about this one thing, yet nobody's here? And it was right around that time, I read a really pivotal book called The E-Myth, The Entrepreneurial Myth, by Michael Gerber. And he talks about how in business, there are really there's three basic kind of identities or people that we need to have to form a proper functioning business. One, you need to have the entrepreneur. You have to have the ideas person. You have to have the manager, the person that takes care of all the numbers, the hiring, the firing, the day-to-day, all that stuff. And also the technician, the person who does the thing. And so many times we think I'm great at this, so I'm going to go off and do my own thing. So I was this great entrepreneur. I had this great entrepreneurial mind. I had all these great ideas, but the other two, the technical stuff, the managerial stuff, I totally sucked at. So it took me having to learn that, and thank God I read that book at that time. It kind of helped me to start to open up those things. And then from there, I started to see that, well, how do I want to just get my voice across that? Like, I know this message is what's going to transform people. And this is back before social media, back before, the huge, expansion of things online. And so I started doing talks in my community. I went to my local rec center. We rented a room, got a bunch of people there, and started speaking. And that didn't even work at first, because I thought I still was in this mindset that, all I need is to just be super excited. And I would just, we've heard many times in chiropractic that in many things that, if they just knew what I knew, they would do what I do. So all I got to do is just tell them everything I know. And then they're just going to like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I'm going to go into my office. I'm going to become into lifetime care. That wasn't it either. I remember walking out on stage, and this is the second time that I had booked this talk, because the first time we had about 100 people sign up and 0 people showed up. 0 people. Happened to be that the Stanley Cup finals, the NHL, the hockey playoffs were on. The finals were on. It was Game 7, and the Calgary Flames, which is the city that was right next to where I was, they were in the finals, and it was in Calgary. So my first talk ever to my community, nobody showed up, and I was just distraught. I was depressed. I was like, okay, but I knew that there are things that just are not in my control. So we booked another talk, and we didn't have as many people. We had about 60 people or so sign up, and they came to the talk. And it gave what I thought at the time, it was my first year in practice. I thought it was just like the best talk ever. It was like, I had like this Martin Luther King moment. I was like, the people are going to, I had this big dream. People are going to come. We're all going to like, let's go. And 0 people signed up. And it was a very sobering moment. And it was then, it's kind of in that low, that was like one of the low moments. But so often when it comes to anything in our life, it takes, we come in a dark place. And in that dark place is when we kind of turn on the light. And I remember thinking, okay, I know people do this. I remember Ian Grasham. I remember guys like Tony Robbins. I remember guys like Mark Victor Hansen. I remember all these speakers at DE, that they used their words and spoke something in me that allowed me to see something bigger in myself and want to take action. So like, if they can do that, like, and I had a couple of other experiences of seeing some different speakers who allowed me to see like, like people can sell stuff. Like people can get people to do things through speaking. And so it took me to kind of see that, to really dive into, and I really dove into, and it's been, kind of an obsession of mine for the last, now 20 some years, to go into, how can we influence people with, the way that we speak. And we have such an amazing gift. And it's such, I hate seeing when people kind of lose their steam, because not, within the first couple of years, we see a lot of people kind of drop out of practice. And I think it's not because they're shitty as chiropractors. It's not because they suck as people, because they just have a missing piece. There's a gap between, what they feel and what they think in their head, and how they can start to then communicate that with people. And once we can start to bridge that gap, I mean, it's game over from there. So that was kind of the biggest piece for me, was how do I get this idea, this big idea, and bring it to the level where people can not only understand but people they could see themselves in it, and they want to take action on it.
Haven't you packaged something that delivers exactly that to the practitioner? What is the offering that you've created recently? Can you maybe talk about that, and what the intention behind that was, and how you designed it, and who you designed it for, and what really the vision is for how your I guess methodology is going to shift the mindset and the ability in the heart for somebody to take action in a big way?
Sure. So yeah, one of the things I started seeing over the years is as a chiropractic student, it was something that I was super big on was I went to all the seminars that I could. I went to all the different adjusting clubs that I could, and it was awesome. And even back then, I could, I could start to see like there was amazing speakers. There's some stories, some stories that people told that like I could see that they didn't land. Some people that were really salesy, and I could start to see even back then like what landed with people, what didn't, and kind of what worked with different audience to do certain things. And I remember years later, like going through, and I've had multiple coaches over the years, and some of them taught like a very scripted way of doing things. And seeing that was really interesting. It was that some people took these scripts that these coaches had, and this is not just specific to chiropractic alone, but this was my experience. But I know that there are coaches that sales scripts and all these different scripts that people have across multiple industries. So it's not just specific to chiropractic. But what it was interesting that I could take a script, and I remember doing this, taking a script for what we call a doctor's report. It was like a healthcare class that we gave to all of our new clients. It was a requirement for everybody to start in my office back in the day, that people came to this healthcare class. And I took this script and I delivered it to the best of my ability, and I was not converting. Like people were just not starting. And I remember going to a seminar with my peers, with my coaches, and going up in front of my own peers and delivering the talk just the way that I would in my office with the exact same script. So we've got the exact same words. We've got the exact same stories. We've got the exact same everything. Yet somebody else was converting way better than me. And I'm like, well, what is the deal? Like, I know that I have what is the deal? And so it's like, well, so there's not just scripts, like there's not just a scripting thing that happens. So there's all these other kind of layers to it. And I also started to see that in the same way, like what is it about one person that can get up and share their own story? And because one of the things that, especially in this new economy, I mean, our message is key. There's guys like Gary Vaynerchuk, who everybody knows at this point. And how did he become super famous? Not doing anything else but telling his own story, telling what the truth was for him. And we live in a world today where everything is on our phones, and everything is like we're in front of people all of the time. And so the way that we communicate for a lot of people, and this was for me for many years, was like it was kind of stuck in the way that we did things in the 90s, the way that we used to do things. And there's some great principles to learn from that. But I think we'd probably agree that, the way that people communicate now is very different than even just a few years ago. And in the future, as we have this whole revolution of AI, this artificial intelligence stuff like ChatGPT that everyone has access to, there's this idea that, I can now remove myself and have the intelligence of this computer thing do all of the work for me. But what ends up happening is that from that is that everybody just starts to sound the same. And so in this new economy, in this new world that we live in, what's going to make the difference between me and you? And I live in an area in Vancouver where within just blocks of me, there are multiple chiropractors. So why would anybody want to come see me over someone else? I remember one of my colleagues, Jamie Richards, said once that, chiropractic is for everyone, but I am not everybody's chiropractor. And I think that's fantastic. And so in my area, I know that everybody needs to get adjusted, but why would they pick me over someone else? Because there's some chiropractors just down the street that are great friends of mine that they would be well served to be there. Like, great. And I even practice with somebody in my own practice. There's another chiropractor with me. Yeah, we have our own kind of separate practices. We practice 15 feet away from each other. Yet my clients in my little half of the practice, even though we do all the same things in terms of our marketing, in terms of all the walk-ins that come in, somehow my practice is filled with people that are more like me, and his practice is filled up with people more like him. Yet we're 15 feet apart. And so what makes the difference between those things is our story. And so I know that, we all have a story, and we look at any of these epic films that we all connect with, the Matrix and the Star Wars and the Lord of the Rings and all these things, they all kind of follow the same context or the same kind of arc. And we know that that's a universal arc, what they refer to as the hero's journey. And to understand that everybody is on their own hero's journey. And if we can start to then communicate that journey to them in a way that allows themselves to see themselves in the stories that we tell, then it's game over. Then it's like, oh, this guy is just like me, right? Because I'm no different than anybody else. I'm no better or worse than any other chiropractor that's around. But I know that, you know, when I speak, it's like, you know, this is me. I'm just like you. I've figured a few things out. Let me show you how. And so when they can identify themselves, because when someone is like, let's say, even somebody who's listening to me right now and listening to you right now, they're not listening to us. No one cares about our story, but what they're hearing is they're framing our story inside of their own story. And how many times, like, you know, we relate to, you know, we watch a movie like Star Wars, and like I've watched Star Wars, I mean, 100 times probably. And each time, like, I can like, oh, I so relate to the Yoda character this time I watched it, because I feel like I'm much more like in this space where I'm the teacher, when I'm allowing, you know, I'm kind of bringing the hero out in someone else, like the Luke Skywalker. Other times I watch a movie and I'm like, oh man, like I so connect with Luke Skywalker right now. Like I'm in a moment in my life where I'm the hero. And we all have all of those different pieces. And so if we can speak in a way and share our message in a way that connects to people's identity and starts to lift that up, that's a huge differentiator in the marketplace today, because nobody else is doing it. And so it's not about, you know, scripts. It's not about, you know, all this like hard work or guesswork about communication. But it's really about having frameworks. And so that's really where like the program that I put together now, it's called Transformational Speaking Academy. And so we really go into frameworks and teach frameworks for people to just transformationally speak, like to speak to someone else, to not just give them tactics or strategies or a bunch of DIY stuff. You can go on YouTube and find all the DIY stuff in the world, but that doesn't necessarily work for anybody. And so many people think that, you know, when I do a talk in my office, if I do a talk in my community, a lot of people are just speaking to that kind of those lower levels. And they're speaking to like, well, here's some strategies, here's some tactics, and that's it. But when someone does them and then they fail, it's because some people will do something, a DIY thing. I've done a ton of DIY stuff from YouTube videos. It looks nothing like the video. I suck at it. You know, I sucked at it. But at that point, but what will end up happening in our communities, someone will do your DIY things. They'll do the little tactics. They'll do the little tips that they give you. They don't work. So they think, this tips work. The tip sucks. And this guy sucks. It's not that the tips suck, but if that's all you're speaking to, then that's not it. But if we start to go higher, then we start to go and talk to people in terms of principles. We talk to people in terms of their identity. And then on top of that, there's a guy named Dilt. Years ago, he formed what's called the logical levels of change. So the levels of logic. And when you're looking to help someone change something, he talked about it more from like a therapeutic standpoint, kind of like counseling standpoint, that at the lowest level, we can start is environment. So you just change your environment. And so, you know, like the idea, like let's say when I'm in Vegas, I drink way too much and I smoke and I gamble. Well, pretty easy to change. Just don't go to Vegas, right? So if you change your environment, you change everything, right? But once we start to move up a little higher in these levels, we start to see that not only from there's, you know, your environment, your behavior, there's your skills, there's values, beliefs, and then on the top of that is your identity. And what we know and what they found out is that if you can start to shift someone at an identity level, everything else below takes care of itself. So if the same thing, if we can start to shift people's identity in how we speak and how we communicate, we speak to their higher identity, their higher self, then all of the things below it, like needing to get checked on a regular basis, like needing to live a more congruent lifestyle, and that's more aligned with what they want, that's more aligned with what we refer to as like a chiropractic lifestyle, that just becomes a given. And all of a sudden, they start to seek those things out because we've spoken to their identity. And there's nothing stronger in the human psyche than wanting to maintain an identity that's congruent with the thinking. And I think that's one of the biggest things that, you know, the biggest problems that I saw in terms of healthcare is we start to see, and even in chiropractic, because here in Vancouver and in British Columbia, it's really restrictive. Like there's a lot of stuff. We have a lot of rules around what we can and can't say in the marketplace, a lot of things we can and can't say when it comes to marketing. And so a lot of people are like, oh, well, I can't tell people that chiropractic is great for kids. I can't tell people that chiropractic is you know, helps people or helps kids with ADHD, or I can't help with this and that, or whatever it is. I'm like, well, yeah, but who cares? I mean, that is, yeah, we want to be able to say things like that, but there's something way bigger than that. And if we start to see things on that level and start to communicate that on that level, then everything else gets taken care of. And so that's something that I saw within my own self and something that I solved for myself. And then I am one that I want to, I want to help transform healthcare. And so I saw a way that I can serve the profession, that I can serve healthcare in general, was to help people, learn the communication strategies, to learn the communication principles and skills and frameworks that I learned, that helped me grow my first practice, that helped me do the things that I do. So that's that was the genesis of that. It's a long-winded answer to.
From an identity standpoint, would you say that you moved from like a chiropractor to a program creator, or like a facilitator of a program that, infuses the chiropractic principles throughout, but it's not necessarily talking specifically about chiropractic, it's talking about transformational speaking? I'm just curious, like, what kind of shift happened in your identity as you started focusing on building this program and working with people in a different way than working with somebody as a chiropractor? I'm just curious on that for a brief moment.
Well, I mean, I think the intent was always to serve chiropractic. So the people that I work with primarily is chiropractors, so, and chiropractic students. And so that's, because that's who I am and that's what I know. So to me, whether I'm speaking one-on-one with a client, whether I'm speaking one-to-many in front of a big group, whether it's to the public or it's to other chiropractors, it's all the same. At the fundamental level, we're all just people. And the more that we can just speak to people as people, then that's it. So the program was created. The program in and of itself, the principles of the program can be taught to anybody for anything, because it's just principles of communication. Those are not, we don't have a stronghold on that. But even let's say like the third three principles of chiropractic. Those are the things that we hold very sacred, but they're not ours. The sixth principle, let's say the principle of time, like that's not just chiropractic, that's life. So, I guess I took on the identity of that. For me, it really took me back to the story I told earlier, but when I was 16 and even 13, seeing Dr. Grassham speak. So I remember like thinking like, I want to do that. And seeing Tony Robbins speak when I was 16 years old for the first time. I did his Firewalk program. And I remember thinking, just sitting there going, I want to do that one day. And at the time I had no idea. I didn't know anything about that. Again, this is pre-internet, a lot of this stuff. Like, I didn't know how people became professional speakers. I didn't even know that was a thing. And it wasn't until years later, like, oh yeah, but it was really what got me into chiropractic, was wanting to share the message with people. And that to me was that was the foundation of everything. And from that, I guess this is just the latest kind of outcropping of that part of my identity, I guess.
Yeah, just to give you a little background, my hope is to shift the identity of college students who are lacking purpose, lacking focus, don't have a career path that they're on, to being a pre-Chiro student, which is going to equip them with an awareness about themselves and the world around them, and empower them to make a difference in the lives of the people around them on their campus, whether it's faculty or other students, in the name of being involved in a pre-chiropractic club that maybe they start after having witnessed like the bigness of what you can do for somebody, using your voice, using your energy, relating to people, being there to support people in service. So I'm just curious, how challenging have you, what are the challenges that your students have? Like, is this something that we can give as a training to pre-chiropractic students that they can start to work with before chiropractic school? Or is this something that's you need a little bit more life experience or a little bit more time to go through the transformation of being a professional and being at a level where you see yourself maybe having more value to your community, having more value to the world? When is the earliest we could start? Because one of my big thesis with this project is that it's never too early to start, and we underestimate the value and the power of our youth, of our teenagers and our young 20-year-old somethings if they have direction and if they have mentorship and support and guidance. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on how your work and your program could potentially integrate in the future when we have a pool of students that are actively seeking growth and opportunities to present or to share or to speak on their college campuses with guidance counselors or fellow teachers, or just raise awareness about chiropractic and how they communicate. Right, the teacher within is there, but bringing that out in a way that's not just about getting over your fear of public speaking, but actually how do you speak to transform, not just speak to inform somebody.
Absolutely. It's so great. And I think you're absolutely right that it is never too early. And one of the things that, going back to one of the things you had mentioned earlier, asked earlier about the thing, when I got into chiropractic college, I felt, being from a chiropractic family, having so many chiropractors in my family, I thought at some point before I actually got to school, I thought that would be a massive advantage. That like, oh, I've been in this has been my world for the entirety of my life. So yeah, like I felt like, wow, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be easy. When I got into chiropractic school, I almost had the exact opposite thought. I thought, oh, I don't have the story like everybody else does. There's so many people that they chose chiropractic because of this reason and that reason. And like they had this transformational thing happen to their own life, or they had an uncle who, had this massive transformation, and I was like, I have nothing. I have none of that. So I felt like, oh, like I've got this like boring ass story. I don't really have a story. And it wasn't until years, into the process where I realized, no, like there is value in my story. There's value in, what kind of became for me as what I refer to as like a silent miracle. That I grew up the way that I did, is that I never experienced these like massive transformations like other people did. But that's also because I never had a massive amount of trauma or, poor health that I had to overcome. And in that, I had to then recognize, and then part of, I guess, when we look at communication, is that, regardless of where you are, whether you're 10 years old, I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. My 7-year-old can tell you some stories about some things that will teach you life lessons for sure. We all have a story to tell. And because we all go through things. I mean, if you can think of a moment where something was hard in your life and then you got over it. You went through a breakup with, had a relationship and you got over it. You had, a challenging day. You had just a really shitty day, and the next day was a little bit better. Well, just in that, you have a story. You have a story to tell that can help others. And so you think about, anything, just from the standpoint of, regardless of where you're at, you can share a message that can help other people. And let's say one of the things oftentimes when people first start in our programs, they think like, well, I don't have a story to tell. I don't know. How do I, like, because I'll put people on the spot and be like, okay, tell me a story. I don't have any stories. And so one way to just get started by being able to become a great storyteller, to become a transformational speaker, whether it's to one-on-one, because most of the speaking, what I've considered transformational speaking, is just one-on-one, is how I can make somebody feel understood, how I can make someone else feel heard, how I can make someone else feel comfortable in sharing themselves and in seeing themselves in me and seeing me in them. And so one way is just to start something, it's an exercise we do, is just to start what we call a story bank. So anytime throughout the day, if you ever have a moment during the day where something kind of emotionally moves you, you sort of feel happy or sad or upset or frustrated or angry, whatever the emotion is, write it down. Write down kind of like the what, when, where of that. And then, because that's something to tell. You've got a story, because there's the context of the story. Like, this is what happened. This is the challenge I had. This is what I did to resolve it. And so in that resolution, that's something that you can teach someone else. I mean, how many times have we just talked to somebody and you just hearing them talk about their day, how they got through something, or how the bad day that they're having, or whatever. Like, we can start to see ourselves in that, because that's what we're always listening for, is our own story. And so we go through a process, another framework we call what, why, lesson, apply. We take any story that you have, like what happened? So take anything where you had some sort of emotional connection to, something that happened where you got through a bad experience. So there's the what happened. Like, why is this important to you? Like, why did it move you? Why did you feel what you felt when you got through it? What's the lesson then that I can, like, what's the bigger lesson that I can apply to my life? Like just this morning or last night, my daughter and we had made these paper airplanes, and I showed her, she's 7.5 years old. So I taught her how to make these little paper airplanes with these big pieces of 11 by 17 paper, and we're throwing them across. And the one that I made was like, I got it right across the room first try. She made this thing, it looked kind of clunky. She threw it, it went like 2 feet and went to the ground, and she did this. Like she just wanted to quit right away. And I said, okay, let's make another one. Let's make another one. Oh, it wasn't very good. I'm like, it wasn't very good yet. And one of the things that we know is that the more that we practice, the better that we get. And so, do you want to make a paper airplane? Yeah. Okay, well, let's do it again. So we did it again. It wasn't until like the 5th try that her thing just sailed across the room. And so just in that, like she learned, hey, if I try hard at things, I can do hard things. And, I got guidance from a teacher. There's all kinds of different lessons that we can, that I can impart from that one little story. And so there's the what, we're making paper airplanes. The why is important because, we want to try things. We're not always good at things when we first start, but we get better if we consistently get at it. And then there's the lesson. The lesson is we can do hard things. The lesson is listen to your teachers. The lesson is, whatever it is that you want to do. And then how then can you apply it? So if I was sharing it in a message to someone, where I was speaking to them, it was a client, a consultation, whether it's from stage, I would say, all right, well, where in your life can you see that you have failed after the first try? Where in your life do you know that you have something that you want to build, that you want to create, that you want to do, and that you just need to stick at it, right? So just that from that one little thing, no matter where you are in life, you have a story to tell. And that one little story can start to shift people's identity. Like, oh yeah, I've done that. How many times have I, quit when things were down? How many times have I done that? And so many times, it's just hearing those stories. The more that we can share ourselves and be vulnerable with what it is that we're feeling, and also look for those things that can then shift other people. So it's starting to just create a list, just create a bank of stories of things that happened at the end of the day. It's like, this is what happened. This happened. This happened. This happened. This happened. I mean, if you just write down one story a day, something that happened that emotionally moved you, one a day, in the next year, you've got a bank of 365 stories you can tell. And we know that as you go through chiropractic college, as you go through the pre-chiropractic program, I mean, there's going to be some shit that you're going to go through. Things are going to challenge you. It's going to be hard. I mean, nobody has any illusion. I don't think anybody has any illusion that going through a program like that is going to be just a walk in the park. And there's in that moment, I mean, another mentor of mine, Dr. Brad Glowacki, he always said, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. So those things that challenge us are the things that are going to help us to transform, and allow that transformation to happen in yourself. Allow yourself to be challenged, and then use that challenge, use that transformation, use that resolution to then help another person. And that's really what it is. It's about just having an awareness, writing things down, and just using it wherever you're at. Because even if you're 7 or you're 70, whether you're in pre-chiropractic, you practice for a year, you have a story to tell. You've got a message that can help to transform others, no doubt.